All right. And as we get started today, I want to read out some of the comments that we have. I won't call out the names, but one person says, strengthen speaking storytelling skill for more powerful, impactful firewalk and glasswalk workshops. And I echo what Harriet said. I too, when I first started teaching, came out and just delivered facts and information. And when I started telling stories, it hits deeper. That'd be the two words I would choose with stories versus information. It hits deeper. As humanity, we are programmed to receive information through stories, and we're more willing to receive information through stories. And so I absolutely think that this is a great skill for that. Another person said, public speaking is one of my biggest fears, as it is for many people on the planet, one of the single most common listed fears. So I've been facing it as frequently as possible so it doesn't cripple me. Yes, I love to hear that. And I find that stories can help us because instead of having to process information in this chronological way, when we tell a story, we're just remembering what happened to us, an honest recollection of something that happened, either a big event or some small event during your day, brings out natural authenticity. You're just recounting something that did happen to you. So you'll be naturally authentic and it's less stressful. I think it brings up less of a fear response to tell a story versus to recite information, if that makes sense. Another person commented, I crave skills that can help me grow and connect with others to be able to communicate my needs. Storytelling is a valuable tool. I love it. We've already talked about how it's very useful to connect with other people, but to communicate your needs, storytelling isn't just a stagecraft. When we tell stories like today, this happened, and when you didn't respond in that way, I felt hurt by that. And so I spent the rest of my day just having a hard time. That's an example of storytelling in a personal, in a social situation where it can actually help to communicate your needs. So well said. Another person said, I'm here because I want to be able to share my knowledge and skills effectively. I think personally, I would say there's no better way than through storytelling. And then lastly, I want to engage more with people on my Facebook group by doing more lives. Will the recording be sent to us later? Yes, we will be sharing the recording with the signups. Good question. And oftentimes, in terms of content creation, going live and creating things, it's hard to think of new things, the newest topic, and discuss it. But simple storytelling of what happened during your day is a great way to facilitate those live videos. And with that, I want to point out this big bullet point here. It doesn't have to be a profound story. I got stuck on that. I thought I needed my very best story of the thing that absolutely changed my life. But we can deliver valuable lessons on a story about going to the grocery store. And you noticed this, and you noticed how you were responding in this way, and you were a little extra kind to this person and mentioned, oh, ma'am, you dropped this, and you felt good about helping. The stories are everywhere. And my first big tip for this seminar for crafting and choosing our stories is not to get too hung up on the profoundness, the extremeness of the story. A good dramatic story, of course, is great. The time you climbed Everest or the time you went skydiving, yes, we want those stories too, but they don't all have to be epic. We can still tell stories that draw people in that aren't necessarily the most profound moment of our life. And getting over that hump, getting over that little wall of, oh, it's not good enough. Any story is good enough. Any story is good enough. If it happened to you in your life, it's worth sharing. The next big point, and I like to repeat a lot so we, take in and walk away with the information. The first big point there is it doesn't have to be profound. The next big point is you're naturally authentic when you're telling a story. When we are trying to process and give a script, read a narrative, a monologue, we often get a little more mechanical with our delivery. But when we tell a story about what happened, Like just recently, my water heater is leaking. My water heater is leaking. I woke up and there's water down in the basement and I don't know what I'm going to do. And I have to call this, and Brandy and I are trying to figure out what to do. Just recounting something in your life that's happening to you just sort of brings out this natural, authentic storyteller. And so that's the next thing, is when we tell stories, we are naturally authentic. Something that's genuinely difficult in stagecraft, whether you're leading a workshop or teaching some juggling or standing on stage or leading a fire walk. It's hard to just feel natural and authentic in front of everybody. And there's almost no better way than to just tell a story from your day, from your life. We naturally shine with authenticity when we share a story from our life. So where does storytelling appear in our lives? And Harriet and I will take just a few moments, because it's so pervasive. It's so all-encompassing. Storytelling is absolutely everywhere. I use it as a teacher. I teach fire magic and juggling and all manner of different skills, both virtually and in person. And I have more and more leaned into the use of stories. I could tell someone, don't throw 3 or 4 wontons in your hand at the same time. That's a fire magic trick. But when you do that, it's very dangerous. But if I tell the story of the time I did it and it blew up in my hand and I got multiple burns, it's more effective. As a firewalk instructor, how firewalking changed my life. The story of the first time I walked on fire. Very, very, very impactful. Marketing, both for fire shows, for workshops, storytelling is huge in marketing. When we paint a picture with a story, it is more palpable to prospective clients. And then the last thing in terms of its major impact in my life is learning lessons. I can at times be very dense. And so it takes creative approaches to get knowledge and wisdom in through my castle walls, so to speak. And I've really been recognizing how stories have had the least resistance, the path of least resistance into my psyche. The tigers and the strawberries, for anybody on this call who knows that, it's a story, but it's got profound life. So through stories that Tolly has shared, through stories my mentor Jeff McBride has shared, through stories other firewalkers tell, and stories in general as a big audiobook fan, some of the biggest lessons I have learned in my life come through simple stories. Harriet, what about you? Where do stories appear and get used in your life?
I think, as I say a moment ago, for me, I really wasn't a natural storyteller. And I didn't really know that I was someone that loved and listening to stories. It was just something that was part of my everyday life. So until I sort of consciously became aware of storytelling, I wasn't using it enough, or certainly not noticing how much impact it can have in life. And like Kevin said, it can really make a difference in so many different areas. And I've kind of shared with you as a speaker from stage, running events, giving keynotes. Somebody said they wanted to do Facebook Lives. Excellent place to share stories. Facebook's Lives should be nice, short, quick, engaging videos that land a point or a message. Perfect way to engage your audience, share a story, keep them hooked, and then share a call to action or your main message at the end of the video. That's a great place to use stories. Facebook Lives, YouTube videos, podcasts, even in interviews. If you're being interviewed and you're answering a question, you can share a short story, again, just to amplify your main point and really help it land with your audience. When you're giving instructions, if you're someone that works with a team, or perhaps you're working with certain individuals for a specific event, and there's something that you really want done at a specific time, we never think of using storytelling with instructions. But how much more powerful is this? Let me just think of a silly, easy example. Okay, emails. Let's say that you're in an environment where you have to send a certain particular email with certain information in it before 9 o'clock in the morning to ensure that your customers get the relevant information that they need. And if you don't send it, not as many customers will join, and therefore you get a lower commission. Yes, that's the environment, that's the scenario we're dealing with. The instruction would be, make sure you send that email before 9 o'clock. Yes? That's the instruction. Not that exciting, not that engaging. And the employee, they may not send it. If they've been out the night before and they're not too fussed about their job, they're probably not getting that email sent before 9 o'clock. Let's be honest. But if we take a breath and instead of giving an instruction, we share, by the way, this email does need to be sent before 9. It really affects our commission. There was actually one time where if it's your story, or there was actually one time where somebody in our business, if it's a colleague, or someone I knew, if it's somewhere else, it's someone that I know didn't send that email before 9 o'clock. And they actually missed out on $1,500 worth of commission. Like, for an email. Would you agree that it's worth sending the email before 9 o'clock? Yeah. Very simple, very small, generic example, but can you feel the difference? That's storytelling in a day-to-day example. Think about with your children. Instead of telling your children, tidy your room, eat your dinner, whatever instruction it might be, what about if you embedded it within a story? Children love stories. How can you share a message and instruction? How can you communicate with your partner, your loved ones, your friends? What about a friend, a girlfriend, or a guy friend that's like dating someone and you're like, oh no, I'm not sure about this person. And you want to just say like, no, don't do it. I don't think you should be with them. Take a breath for a second. People love advice. They love guidance, but they don't love to be told. What happens when you tell your friend that? I don't think you should do that. Well, I want to. I really like him. We're having fun. You don't know him. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Yeah? Oh, awkward. But what if you share a story? Maybe it's something about him. Maybe it's about an experience you didn't feel comfortable with. Maybe it's about a completely separate friend and you got a funny feeling and it turned out not to be okay. And I'm not saying don't be with him. I'm just saying I know that this has happened in the past and I love you. I care about you. I just wanted to share that experience so that you're aware and you take a moment to think. Different experience, right? So there's just a couple of different easy examples on how storytelling can make a difference in your everyday life.
I love it. And it's so true. People love guidance, people love knowledge, but they don't want to be told what to do. And I think that's at the heart of the value of storytelling is that's true. We're skeptical. We have a wall up against someone telling us what to do. And I think that's reasonable. There's many times that is a good thing. And yet these blocks, these walls, these shields often stop us from really receiving, not just hearing, but receiving valuable information. And as we get started in just a few moments, we're going to talk you through and help you choose one of your stories. Again, it could be you went to the store and they were all out of chili and you had to figure something out. It could be a dramatic and powerful moment in your life or anything between. And I just want to give you that heads up as I tell one quick story that's what's coming up. We want to help you to pick a certain story from your life, and then we will help you refine, define, craft, hone the story. And as both of us have now said, storytelling is a skill, and that means we can get better at that skill. And so start thinking about a story in your life. And the end goal for any speakers, or I think anyone in general, is to have that library of stories, like a quill of arrows on your back, ready to be deployed at any time at just the right moment. And if we craft several stories, we become a powerful and more effective speaker or just communicator in general. The example I wanted to share is a story Tali has told many times. And the lesson, the takeaway, the value of the story is in the value of optimism, how optimism can improve the quality of our lives. Now, I could just tell you, you should try to be more optimistic. But really, that doesn't get received well. A lot of blocks come up. Think a lot of people in the modern age will think, oh, toxic positivity and things like that. And I want to be clear, there is such a thing, to be sure. But I do believe that when we train ourselves to be more optimistic, we experience a better quality of life. Now, the story to share that. Something Tolly has told many times. I love it. It's very simple. It's about going to the movie theater. Two men head to the movie theater. They're getting there a little bit late, and there's a big line for the tickets. Big line. They're already late. It's the latest premiere. It just came out. They're very excited to see this movie. Now, one of them, he shows up, he sees the line. He's like, oh, damn it. We're never going to get in. I should have come earlier. This is ridiculous. I hate lines. And the other gentleman with him is thinking, oh, I can't wait to get the popcorn and some Juju Bears. I love the previews. I just can't wait. I don't care where I'm sitting. This is going to be good. And the line continues and continues. It's taking forever. The movie's almost about to start. The other guy is thinking, this is absolutely screwed. I shouldn't have come. I just know that we're not going to get into this film. This always happens to me. I never get what I want. And he's just in this tight, hard place. And the other gentleman's like, oh, wow, I can't wait. My favorite actress is in this film. And I've been following the books forever. I just know it's going to be amazing. And I could keep going, but to shorten the story, they get to the ticket counter after 20 minutes of waiting in line. And it is sold out. It's sold out, literally the person before him. And the negative, the person in the negative state is just like, I knew it. He just stomps and storms away. And the other person thinks, oh, well, next time. The idea, the concept is that the gentleman who was existing in a positive state throughout experienced a better quality of life, a happier, healthier, just more buoyant, more joyful experience of existence while waiting in that line. And the other gentleman who was right, he was right. There was no tickets. They were never getting in. The more negative individual was on a factual level quite correct. And even you could say a tad less delusional. And yet he suffered throughout the whole experience. Same result, two different experiences of it happening. It's a story using two people that went to a movie theater to tell a deep and profound lesson. And oftentimes those land better than the direct lesson. Being more optimistic intentionally can help you improve your quality of life. Those words land flat. They are dry. But when we deliver the story, it helps us to visualize what's happening, to see a context, to put ourselves in that scenario. So, and Harriet, I'll say it again, people love to advice and sage wisdom and counsel, but they hate to be told what to do. That hits home. Okay, moving forward now to choosing a story for you from your life to help you craft. One of the things we want to identify here is, what is the message? What is the goal? And I am going to bring Harriet back, and I just want to take a moment before I do to just shine and glow about having Harriet Bratt here as a co-presenter. I have done lots of speaker trainings, and I've been telling stories for a long time, but not at the level that Harriet has. Harriet is a true speaker trainer of world-class knowledge, wisdom, and I'm just so inspired and happy to have her here with us. So Harriet, when choosing a story, what are some things they can look for? Let's help guide them. Everyone here on this call, we want you to choose at least one story to craft, to define and refine. Harriet.
Amazing. And thank you so much for your kind words. I appreciate you. And of course, Kevin is both an incredible friend, an amazing speaker himself, and is my Firewalk instructor, mentor for life. I ask him everything. He's just the absolute magician of knowledge in that area. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And right back at you. It's a pleasure to be working with you here. Storytelling and choosing your story. How many of you find that a little bit overwhelming? Just raise a hand if it's a little bit like, which story do I use? What should I choose? Which one should I share? So most of you are like that. So are the rest of you like, I know which story I want to share. I know what I want to say. I just want to improve how I share it. Is that the rest of you? Nodding head. Amazing. Thank you, everybody. So first of all, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and as Kevin said, talking about choosing your story. So Ted, you can do like a checkbox here to make sure you've chosen the right story for yourself. Choosing your story. First of all, first most important question to ask yourself when choosing your story is, who's my audience? Who am I speaking to? Because before you can choose your story, you need to, and here's my biggest tip about choosing your story, make sure it's relevant. Number one, relevant story. You have heard Kevin and I both sharing our story today about how we use stories. Both different experiences. Kevin's always used stories. He is a natural storyteller. I love hearing Kevin's stories. It's what engaged me to working with him when I first met him. And mine, where I wasn't a natural storyteller, I had to learn the skill. So we specifically shared our story about storytelling. Did anyone notice that? We didn't share when I was bullied in school. I didn't talk about my ADHD. I didn't talk about firewalking in this moment. I know that some of you want to use this for firewalks and glass walks. Amazing! Storytelling is so powerful in that environment. But notice, we chose the most relevant story for the time that we have with you. And yes, we've shared other stories and we're going to share more. But we've chosen the most relevant story to this scenario. Is everybody with me?
Yep.
So that would be my biggest tip. What is your relevant story? And that comes from, first and foremost, who is my audience? Who am I talking to? So for example, on Friday, I'm speaking at a graduation talk for a school. I don't do a lot of those, but it's a different environment. It's a different audience. So I am sharing the story from school, how I felt when I left on Leavers Day. You see? I'm sharing the story, and I want to choose a couple of others as well, but I'm sharing my story from school and the transition that they are about to go on. Make sense? If it was for a group of entrepreneurs scaling their business from 6 to 7 figures that all speak but want to improve the skill, I'm not sharing that story. I'm sharing the story about me doing similar, about me scaling my business, about how I used public speaking to improve my income and my impact. So it's a relevant story in that moment. So who are you speaking to? And for those of you that are thinking, oh, well, it's Facebook Live, I'm not sure exactly who's going to be listening. Well, number one, really understand who perhaps your ideal audience is. And we're not here to dive into that tonight, but it's something that we can touch on if people are really interested and want to know more. Who is your ideal audience? And imagine you are speaking to them. Like whenever you look at the camera, don't think you're speaking to the camera. Imagine you're speaking to like your ideal client, your ideal member of your audience. Who do you want to hear this message? And if you don't know who the audience and you want a little bit more guidance of that, question number one was, who's my audience? Question number two is, what is my message? What is the point of me speaking today? Why am I standing on that stage? Why am I giving this masterclass? Why am I leading a glass walk? Why am I leading the fire walk? After they've walked on that fire, what do I want them to feel? I want them to feel empowered. They're probably going to be scared. They're probably going to feel the fear before they walk the fire, but they're going to feel amazing and super empowered after they've done it. So what story do I know where I was super scared, but I did whatever I needed to be done in that moment, and I walked the fire and conquered it? Yes, relevant story, context to scenario. And again, if it's a Facebook Live, why are you clicking the button? Yes, why are you going live? What do you want to share? What's the point of your broadcast in that moment? And then you connect the story to the message. A lot of people don't think of it that way around. They think, what story should I share today? What story shall I use? No. What story amplifies the point that I am trying to make the best, in the best way for the audience to receive? Everybody with me? Thank you. Those are my top thoughts on choosing your story. So back to Kevin.
Thank you very much. And yeah, what is your message? I still get hung up on this sometimes, and definitely did more in the past in trying to want to craft the perfect message that will change people's lives the moment they hear it. And it's important to not get too hung up on getting the perfect message. Sometimes the message is get up and try again. Sometimes the message is do it even though you're afraid. Sometimes the message is you can't win them all. Sometimes the message is you need to take a nap and just chill. There are so many messages that have value that don't have to be deeply profound. So if you're like me and get a little hung up on, oh, what is my message? Try to just loosen up the shoulders a little bit. It doesn't have to be the most profound thing you've ever done. And for this moment, I'm going to talk Harriet through picking a story, if that's okay, Harriet. And I'll invite, if anyone wants to, I know they can be personal and challenging. We invite you to put a message or a story here in the group chat, and we will take the opportunity to talk and to work with you on defining that story. And while we wait for that, Harriet, give me three potential stories from your life or otherwise that you can craft into a story.
Sure. And I just popped in the chat there, but I really do highly encourage you. Absolutely no pressure. Whether you do or you don't is totally cool. But I really encourage you. Do we agree that we're in a safe space? You're all here to learn how to improve your storytelling and take value from this. I really promise you that you will take more value if you step in, raise your hand, or put in the comments box and come and share the story that you're thinking about so that we can provide feedback. No pressure, but it would be super powerful for you. Please excuse me. This happens sometimes as a speaker. Kevin, my stories. I remember. Here we go.
Give me three stories.
Three stories. Yes,
not the full story, just the big picture.
Yes. So just to remind everyone, always choose your story in the context of where you are speaking it. So I'm going to continue with the example that we used earlier to use this speaking at a graduation talk. And I'm going to use three different stories. One, chopping up chili in the kitchen and stinging my eyes. Number two, being bullied in school and gaining the lesson later in life. And number three, having a fear of public speaking.
Great. And I want to just point out that Harriet was just willing to kind of just throw those out there. We didn't pre-plan them. And that's what we're hoping from you too, is to, you know, if you have one that's clearly, this is my story, great. If not, list out a few. The time I won the skiing hill, the time I broke my knee, the time I spoke in front of a large group of people for the first time. So Harriet, chili, bullied, and fear of public speaking. So extra fast, not worried about too much about the details. What is the lesson in each one? What is the chili lesson?
Sometimes we don't learn the lesson instantly. Be kind to yourself and
so
trust
true.
the process.
Alexandra, I noticed your comment in the chat. My mind is blank. I get that all the time. And this is a good moment to step up to that wall. And let's go with something simple. When was the last time when was the last time you learned something? When was the last time you were frustrated or upset? You know, when was whether it's a flat tire or the sink didn't work, or a good friend came over and you were just reminded about how good it is to have friends. What I'm getting at here is try to lower your wall down. When the wall is high and we want a good, profound, perfect story, it's hard to get there. But when we lower that wall, limit the shield, and let in simple stories from our life, it's about the practice of evolving the story, not about the story itself. This isn't your end-all final story. This is a practice towards a technique so that when you do choose a good story, you'll feel more apt and able to grow and evolve it. So chopping chili is the first one. Second one, what's the lesson in the bullied story?
Would it be okay if I just jump in as well on what you just shared?
Yes, of course.
I just think this is a really important point for everybody. How many of you have that moment? My mind's got blank. I don't know what to share. I've lost my place. They're looking at me funny. He just walked out. Am I boring people? How many of you make those statements about yourselves? Yeah. We all do this. As Kevin said, I'm a speaker trainer. I absolutely love what I do and I love seeing people shine from stage. These are normal feelings. I still have these moments. You saw me do it a second ago. Like, what was I about to share? Yeah, it's okay. But when we hone in on that, talking about stories, there's a story inside of your mind, how you speak to yourself. I'm so passionate about this. I had to share it with you. Is that okay? Bit of a bonus here. The story you tell yourself inside of your mind. If you say, my mind's gone blank, and I get it, Alexandra, we feel that. Kevin's like, yep, absolutely had that. But when you say that statement or that story, that's what you believe about yourself. Ask questions. Don't make statements. Ask questions and don't try and fight it. Oh, my mind's gone blank right now. I can't think of a story. I can't think of a story. I can't think of what to say. Well, guess what? You're not going to. Like with love, and I've been there. You're going to keep feeling that you can't find the words or how to carry on. But if you just pause, my mind's gone blank, and that's okay. My mind's gone blank, and that's okay. I remember this weird woman reminding me of this on Zoom. My mind's gone blank, and that's okay. But what is a story I could think of? That man told me that I could use any story. What was something that happened to me yesterday? Or what happened last week? What happened to a friend? Did I have an awesome interaction with a dog? Did I make somebody smile? Like, start asking yourself questions instead of making statements. When we make a statement, your mind switches off. When you ask a question, your mind will automatically respond. So, Alexandra and everybody else, if you do feel that, I don't know which story to pick, ask yourself, what story shall I use? What story shall I share right now? Which one shall I think about? I hope that was helpful, everybody. Okay, number 2 of sharing the story, we had Chile. Number 2 was being bullied. So the message from that was, don't let anybody else's opinion define your reality and stay true to yourself.
Nice, powerful. And the third one around fear of public speaking.
I should have this one completely nailed and defined, as it's where I support people. But again, I'm a bit like Kevin. I have a few different messages here, but I think the main one would be fear is natural. Feel the fear and speak up anyway.
Nice. Okay. Well, all of them are very powerful. Now, Harriet, I know you're very good at this, so I feel like throwing you a curveball a little bit here and saying, let's develop the Chile story. We've had a few people who have just been mentioning, oh, it's difficult to choose the story. Well, the Chile story is a story of a grocery shopping trip, and we can impart knowledge. We can share something about us. We can connect with other people through simple stories in our life. And yes, of course, there's going too long, right? A 20-minute Chile story is probably over the top for a trip to the grocery store, but a nice 2 to 5 minute story with a good lesson attached to it. Let's go with the Chile story. I want to zoom in on, we have a comment in the chat, big picture. First firewalk that you ever did, crying, being assisted across, life changing. Ah, I love it. It's so powerful. You can tell people that firewalking can change your life. It can be a deeply healing and powerful experience, or you can share your story about how it changed your life and how it was a deeply healing and impactful experience. Truly, as a firewalk instructor, that is like a great story. So I hope you've chosen your story now. You can type it in the chat. We're not expecting you to. I hope you have it written down. I have it written down. I have Deep Coal Bed right here. Oh, we just got another one in this Ted, excellent. The story of my first firewalk is something I use often, as it can be used as different metaphors, making a life change, the importance of keeping our eyes on the goal and or the power of intention, and how much it impacted my success. I love that. Those are such valuable teachings. The importance of keeping our eyes on the goal, the power of intention. These are life-altering lessons. If only we can let our shield down just a little bit to let that information, that wisdom in. And there's telling people that, and then there's sharing that story, Ted. And I love, you are a powerful storyteller. So I got the goosebumps already just thinking about it. So you've got your story written down. Mine is Deep Coal Bed. Harriet's is going to the store for Chile. You have yours. Now let's dive into crafting the story. And the reality is we could talk for another hour about choosing stories, plucking them. But I think just walk away with these tips. Who are you telling the story to? What is the message? What is the teaching? And don't worry about it being some massively profound thing. Those three things alone can help you to choose your stories. Now we want to dive into crafting your stories. You want stories that are natural. You want stories that have a point. And this is valuable. I recommend you write this down. You have a succinct and defined point to your story. By that, I mean, it's easy to have a vague, well, the story means that if you give it your best, that you keep getting up and you always do this, then you'll find that's not very succinct. If you have a succinct, quick, easily repeatable meaning or message to the story, it's much easier to stay connected to that. The story about the movie theater is there is value in optimism. Optimism can improve your quality of life. That's it. One sentence. Instead of rambling on, what does that story mean? Well, it means that sometimes we get into situations that are difficult. And if we, try to be more optimistic, even throughout the difficulty, we suffer less. And that's such a long sentence that the next time I say it, it would be different. But when it's short and succinct, it's easily repeatable. It's easy to remind ourselves. It's easier to stay on track. Optimism can improve your quality of life. That is the simple, succinct meaning. So, we got another comment. My first fire festival, watching my daughter graduate, learning mixology, all three amazing stories. You can't go wrong with those, my friend. You can't go wrong with any of those. Pick one. Now it's time to pick one. For those of you with three, because now we want to craft our story, to define and refine, to dive into the magic of having it feel natural and not like a recited essay, while at the same time actually having work and effort behind it, to take a story and elevate it through a variety of tips and techniques. And this is, again, we could dive in and spend hours on this. We only have about an hour, 10 minutes left. And we want to give you concrete tools and tips for crafting your story. So starting with, fundamentals, beginning, a middle, and an end. Every time I say this, even coming out of my mouth, it always sounds so simple. Duh, everybody knows. An obvious, the beginning, middle, end. And yet it's extremely important to define the beginning, the middle, and the end. Harriet, what's the beginning of the chili story?
I was just trying to think. The beginning of the chili story, as in how I would start it, or we're just raw libbing right now?
Either. We're just ad-libbing. We're guiding you through the
Excellent.
process as a mirror for them.
So I'm in the kitchen and I'm preparing one of my favorite meals, which is prawns with chili, coriander, garlic, spring onions, etc., etc.
You're in the
beginning.
kitchen. What's the middle of the story? Simply put.
The middle is cooking it, eating it, enjoying all those lovely different flavors, then sitting down at the table, enjoying it just before I was about to log on. In fact, for today's prep before our masterclass. So sitting, eating it, and enjoying it at the masterclass.
Great. And the end.
And what's the end is the end is just before the masterclass was starting, and I was about to meet Kevin for a call, wiping my eye like this. How many of you have done that after you've chopped chili? Completely forgetting that I'd chopped chili, even though I washed my hands, and experiencing burning in my eye.
I thought you were just all emotional about the seminar. That's funny. Great. Now, I want to point out to everyone, when you just look at that, when you look at beginning, middle, end, there's often a sense of, whoa, that's mundane. She was in her kitchen. She was making the chili. She wiped her hand without really noticing. That's later. She was in the kitchen. making her favorite dish. Then there she's actively chopping and making it, and then she sits down for the Zoom call, wipes her eye, and has an intense experience. When you just list out the facts, that does not a story make, and yet they are vital. They are vital. My example of the deep coal bed. The beginning is I'm sitting outside after a big fire walk with a fellow instructor from the UK, and we have a large coal bed left over because, you know, we were expecting 100 people. We had about 40. And so there's this massive coal bed left, and everyone went into the seminar, and we were just there handling the thing. The middle is this guy tells me, oh, you can walk through that. And I'm not kidding. That thing was deep. He's like, yeah, we can walk through that. Let's do it. I thought he was just joking, kind of being like a tough guy. And then the end is we walked through the deep coal bed, and it blew my flipping mind that I stepped into multiple times this really deep coal bed. That's my beginning, the middle, and the end. Write it down. It feels mundane, but write it down. Write it down. What is the beginning? What is the middle? And what is the end? And as we head to the next major suggestion is, and this suggestion is clearly define the beginning, the middle, and the end. Get over that hump of, oh, this is obvious, or, oh, this is mundane, or this is boring. Clearly define it. Seriously, is that you don't have to go in that order. You don't have to go in that order, but you need all three of those pieces. An example might be Harriet. There I was hopping on the Zoom call for our speaker thing, and my eye is burning like all hell, and I just put chili in my face. That's starting with the end. You don't always have to start with the beginning, but you do want to have a beginning, middle, and end. I'll say it again. I keep saying it. It seems obvious. It seems mundane, but within those obvious and mundane things lie the core building blocks of what we want to establish. We've all heard that person whose story goes like this. It's like, where are you going with this? They just keep going. It's a train of thought, right? A good story is not a random train of thought. There's room for improv, but it stays on track and gets to where it's going. And if you don't have a clear beginning, middle, and end, oftentimes we just, oh, and then this thing that happened 2 weeks ago. And we want to stay on track. We want a clear beginning, middle, and end. That's the first major tip on crafting your story. For the next one, I hand it over to Harriet, unless you want to add on to that.
Excellent. No, I think I do. I'd love to actually. Very quickly, just to give another example, Kevin shared it amazingly then. I hope you were taking notes. At the beginning, middle, and end, he gave an example of sharing that chili story. For me, you know, we were just throwing it out there as an idea for a story. If I was using it on a call, I would ask. I'd start with asking questions. Has anyone ever been burnt in life? Have you ever had something happen to you? Maybe even it's happened a few times, and it really frustrates you. It really even upsets you. And you swear to yourself, I'm never going to put myself through that again. And yet you find yourself back there. How many of you have ever done that before? Just raise your hand if that's happened to you. Thank you so much. That's everybody in the room. Well, you are not going to believe this. Earlier on today, I was in the kitchen preparing my favorite meal, right? And then I go into my story. And then, of course, at the end, I look back and say, and I burn my eye. But guess what? We don't always learn the lesson straight away. Be kind to yourself. This life is a process, etc., etc. So there's a kind of a different spin on Kevin's idea. I have to say it because I think it would be amazing. And actually, I'm curious. So I hope you come forward and share this. Is it Michouan? Please excuse my pronunciation here, but Michouan put that you glass walked for 30 days in your garage before ever sharing. I mean, you just writing that for me is like, I want to know more. You glass walked in I mean, as a glass walker and someone that loves it, I kind of get it. And yet I'm still like, I want to know more. For the public, for your audience, for your participants at your event, just saying that, like, that's such a powerful start. I glass walked for 30 days in my garage before I ever shared this at an event. Pause. Now your whole audience is going, what? Excuse me? They're paying attention. They're engaging. What? You glass walked for 30 days and then continue. And some of you might be wondering why. But in order to share that with you, I need to take you back to the beginning. I need you to come to my garage with me. Yeah? So there's just an example of a very captivating start with simply what you just shared then. Tip number 2, I don't know if this is an English thing. You may have heard this in America. I don't know if it's an English thing or if it was a my mum thing, actually, to be honest. But have you ever heard the expression, it's not what you said, it's the way you said it? Has anyone ever heard that before? Yeah, it's not what you said, it's the way you said it. When I was a teenager, my mom used to say that all the time. I can't always remember exactly what I was saying, but I'd answer back and say, da 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 da. Harriet, don't speak to me like that. I didn't say anything wrong. It's not what you said, it's the way you said it. Little did I know how meaningful this would be in my speaker, for me as a speaker, but also as a speaker trainer. Your tonality is pivotal. For me, it's one of my favorite areas of public speaking. I'm putting it out there. I am the queen of tonality. I'm so passionate about it. It's what takes the words in your mouth into the hearts of your audience. People say content is king. People say delivery or content, delivery or content. I will say delivery all day long. Why? Would you agree with me that we are living in an immensely content-rich world right now? Information is everywhere. Whether you ask a friend, a teacher, a mentor, a trainer, attend a webinar, an event, a course, whether you ask AI, you can get content anywhere. Now, please, please don't mistake me. Your content matters. What you say is important. Yes, of course, you want to include interesting content and information and stories that are going to land with your audience. But remember, it's not what you say, it is the way that you say it. So when you're sharing a story, did you notice in Kevin's example earlier, he spoke about getting really excited. In Tolly's example, he spoke about somebody getting really excited. So Kevin got really excited in that moment. It's about how can you connect the emotion of the story. And I really encourage you to write this down. Everyone has a specific experience. Everyone has a specific story. But the audience connect through general emotion. You have a specific story, but your audience connect through general emotion. What do I mean by this? Your audience weren't there. It's your experience. It's your story. So they haven't been there. But like with the chili, maybe they've experienced it. But did you notice at the beginning I said, has anyone ever got burned? Has anyone ever experienced something that wasn't very nice and yet it happened again and again? And you all raised your hands because everyone can relate to those emotions. And now, just one more time, be honest here. Raise your hand if you've chopped chilies and put your finger in your eye. Just be really honest here. If you haven't, don't raise your hand. Okay? That's some of you. Now, if you haven't, raise your hand. So some of you haven't. That's a really generic example, yes? But you see what I'm saying? At your events, not everyone will have experienced your story, but they can relate to the emotion of it. They can relate to the feeling. So share your story or a story, but connect with your audience through emotional connection, engagement, and easily, effortlessly, tonality. And very quickly, before I hand back to Kevin, before our third and kind of final for now tip to crafting your story. For me, crafting your story absolutely includes your tonality, the way in which you're sharing your story. Listen to this. Last weekend, my dad, who has been sailing since he was a little boy, went out on his boat. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the wind picked up. His boat was blown off course. He traveled along a certain distance for a little while, and even as an experienced sailor, he couldn't stop it. It went into the rocks. He fell overboard, and he actually ended up drowning. A horrendous story, right? And yet you're all sitting there like this. Didn't hit your heart. Even though you know it's an example, there is no emotional connection to what I said. Horrendous example, but it's like, it just doesn't touch your heart. And yet, if I were to say to you that earlier on today, I took my beautiful dogs out for a walk. How many of you have got dogs? Any other dog lovers out there? I got two. And the little one, Bob, is like one of those energetic buddies. He just goes and goes and goes and goes. So I was throwing the ball for him, and he's going back and forth, back and forth. And suddenly it's in a new area. I don't know this place. Suddenly I launch the ball. It's like my biggest throw. And I'm like, yes, I've never thrown the ball this far. But then I realized, oh my God, oh my gosh, there is a road. There is a road. I've just seen a car go really fast. The ball's got to cross the road, and Bob is still flying towards the road. Oh my God. Oh my God. Bob! 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 How many of you are more emotionally connected to the story I just told about my dog rather than the story I just told about my dad falling off a boat and drowning? And what was the only difference within that story? Yes, content, but you'll agree the one that landed was better, still horrible, but better than the first one I told. So what was the only difference? Tonality. It's not what you say, it's not the story you tell, it's the way in which you share it. Back to
Well
tip
said.
3.
Tonality. It's important. When we speak as a monotone voice, we are far less impactful, and that is known by both science and everybody who's ever heard a story alike. But how do we improve tonality? It's one thing to say, have more variation in your tone and make sure to hit the lowest lows and the highest highs and everything in between. But there are activities and exercises that can help us achieve better tonality. This next one, I think Ted, you're familiar with Chris Denham, one of the finest speaker trainers in the world from the Zig Ziglar Corporation. I was blessed to take a few speaking trainings with him, and he gave us this exercise. He called it the Adventure Walk. It's really is a map of your story. And it is, we would read these aloud, and as we hit pinnacles and lows and highs, the instruction was to change our tonality accordingly. It's simple, but I tell you what, when they first told me to range my tonality, have more tone, those words didn't quite hit. Okay. Does that mean I just yell at people all the time? No, it doesn't mean that. We want range. And this little map that I just drew out of my story, this is the story I just chose, the deep coal bed story. Here I am. So I'm a regular tone, and I'm there by the fire with my good friend Steve, and he tells me that we can walk through this super deep coal bed. And I'm like, you're crazy. That's not possible. He's like, no, really, we can do that. We can walk through this deep coal bed. I will show you. And I was just so skeptical, and I sat there going, yeah, right. And before my very eyes, he stomps through the deepest coal bed I've ever seen in person. And then after that, I did it. I followed up and did the same thing. It was crazy. And I will never forget that moment my entire life, because it taught me that even as an empowered individual, I still argue for my own limitations. Very simple example, a very short, condensed story, but reading it and watching the line actually helped me lower and increase the inflection of my voice. Especially when we're anxious, we tend to stay right at a certain tonality. So tip 1 to actually range and improve and increase your tonality is draw a little map, a little adventure map of ups and downs, and then modulate your voice accordingly, like you were reading a piece of sheet music. With so many of these things, they feel a little weird to do. It feels a little strange to do that and then modulate your voice up and down, but that's where the growth is. That's where the skill building is. Do the activities, do the exercises. Another one is speaking with emotional energy. I think some of us connect with that in a way that is perhaps more deep. For some of us, when we say vary your tone, it hits the surface. But if we say speak with emotional energy, speak with quiet reverence, Speak with love and joy in your heart. Speak with anger and upsetness and righteous attitude. Speak with intense excitement. We are able, as humans, to summon emotional energy very quickly. And it's not as hard as you might think to go from one extreme to another. And, Harriet is just this big ball of exciting emotional energy, but she doesn't stay up here. She can also bring it down and really feel the thing and reflect it. Emotional energy is something that can change. And before I dive into the third big tip here, I want to make a note about what is often called inner alchemy. That is the idea of taking an emotional, energized state and shifting it, not getting rid of it. And therein lies some of the magic. I still get anxious and scared today in front of big crowds. Absolutely. It's not like that actually goes away. I just did a firewalk for 300 people at Plaything. And right before we started, I'm like, oh man, I don't have a microphone. This is going to be crazy. What's going to happen? That's an angst, an intensity, an energy. And I've learned over the years that you can take that energy and shift it over into excitement. You can take nervousness and shift it over into like a focused sort of clarity. There's 100 ways to work with your energetic state. And if you are scared or anxious in front of a crowd, the last thing you want to do is beat yourself up about that. Why am I? Oh, I can't do that. If you take, okay, this is a state. It's like that person who's crying or laughing, and one little shift in what's going on in their mind shifts it. It's like, there's a similar energy there. And as their thoughts shift, so too does it express, because often the whole idea of just get rid of it, put it away, doesn't work, at least not for me. If I'm anxious, I can't just say, Kevin, stop being anxious. I do much better to transmute that energy, that charged state, into something that will at least serve me. So, top 3 tips. First off, beginning, middle, and end. Actually write them down. Define. It's more important than it seems. It seems obvious. It seems mundane, but it keeps you on track. You tell your story, beginning, middle, end. Write them down. 2, tonality. And varying your tonality is what keeps people engaged. I recommend, if you really want to improve in that field, to look up Harriet and her programs. She leads speaker programs on the regular, and they are world-class. And so I'm sure you'll give a pitch later, but Harriet's a master. If you want to improve your tonality, because they've done scientific studies that show when we don't have much tonality and energy variation, people tune out. Even attentive, very smart people who care about what you're saying tune out. But when we're up here and then down here and then here and then there and then back, it just keeps people more engaged. Can that go too far? Definitely. We've all heard the person, it's too much. I myself have been too much once or twice. But it is so important. Tonality, tonality, tonality. How do I improve my tonality? Draw a little map and follow with your vocal energy as you practice telling the story. Was one of the single best things I did to help me. Use emotional energy. You don't want to feign or fake being sad, but you can summon genuine sorrow. Most of us quite easily, because it's right there, right? It's right next. It's very accessible. But you can summon genuine joy, and you can summon anger, and you can summon calmness and peace and love. And when we actually summon these emotions, we are naturally varying on our tone. And then we have creating engagement. Number 3 on the story. Harriet's the master at this. Like she said, she's just a story about chili. But right off the stop, how many of you have ever burned yourself? How many of you have ever done this thing that, caused you pain? But it's not just in the beginning with an opening question. How do we create engagement in our storytelling? You could be halfway through. And then Steve told me that he could step through this, and I just thought, he is so full of shit. How many of you have experienced something in your life where somebody told you something and you just thought, no way, that's ridiculous? How many of you have? That's an example of me in the middle of the story recalling. and then maybe toward the end, and that moment exploded my brain. I should have worn a hat or helmet so it didn't make a mess when he blew my mind. Have you ever just been so shocked and surprised? By doing that, by creating engagement, we take them into their mind. There's listening to you, and then there's thinking and internal processing. The idea of creating an engagement is not as complex as it seems. Harriet's example, it's a cooking story. She's making chili. It's not the most impactful moment in her life, and yet she's able to create some engagement. She's able to create some engagement with that. So those would be the top 3 tips, and we're going to share a bunch more because we have more time with you. I'm a big on repetition, because if it's easy to receive the information, but to retain and to gain the insight into it, we need to hear it again and again. Define clearly the beginning, the middle, and the end. Work on your tonality. If tonality is not your strong point, do some of the exercises that I mentioned. Just try to be a little more tonal in your day-to-day conversation. I'll say this 100 times. If we only practice our speaking skills on stage in front of people, we don't get much practice. If we only practice our speaking skills, our storytelling skills on stage in front of groups of people, we don't get much practice. But life is filled with practice. You can practice your tonality with a loved one on the phone. You can practice your tonality even typing through the use of exclamation points and question marks and emojis. Practice is everywhere. The next time you have a conversation, try to just get a little bit more tonal variety. And if you do that 20, 30 times throughout your day-to-day conversations, you will naturally have more tonal variety. And then the third one is create engagement. Easiest way to do that, ask questions. Have you ever? When was the last time that what does it feel like? How does that feel? It didn't feel very good, did it? All examples of creating engagement, getting them to think and process on their own. Another one, what's the pinnacle moment? What's the peak? What's the peak of your story? And the nice thing is you get to decide. Harriet, what's the peak, the pinnacle of your chili story?
I would say the moment I burnt my eye.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the pinnacle. That can help us to create that tonality that Harriet's talking about. For me, the pinnacle was first seeing Steve step into the deep coal bed and then doing it myself. That's the pinnacle moment. So defining what the pinnacle moment is. And I think really that ties into beginning, middle, and end. And yet sometimes the pinnacle moment is right in the beginning. What's the pinnacle moment? They were out of my favorite brand of ice cream. That can be the pinnacle moment. It feels, again, so what if it's a little mundane? I tried the trick 10 times and I still dropped it, and I just threw the props down and said, ah! That can be the pinnacle moment. What's the pinnacle moment? We have a comment here real quick. Perspectives about myself. The affirmation of choosing my own name. Bella, love it. Story of when I let go of self-loathing and I began the self-love journey. These are so profound. I finally saw the beauty inside, and because what I saw inside changing my entire life. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I became what I saw when I chose to see myself through new perspective. That is so powerful, Harriet.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in. I've been itching because Bella popped that in when you were in such amazing flow. Is everybody taking value from this so far? No one? Just a few of you? Is this helping you guys? Yes, thank you. I couldn't help but think of this, Bella. What a beautiful story and what a perfect example. And just to kind of connect it to what Kevin was just sharing there. So how could you break this story into that beginning, middle, and end? Yes. And when we talk about that specific example, that pinnacle moment that Kevin was just referring to you. So for you, and I'm sorry to sound blasé, I send love, I send empathy. It sounds like you're on the other side and helping people with this message, which is amazing. But I just want to say this can come across as candid, but I'm just training the moment rather than leaning in as a coach to the moment. Yes. So for you, what was that pinnacle moment? What was the moment for you where you felt your most, for whatever reason it was, you hated yourself, it was self-doubt, it was anxiety, you couldn't leave the house, you were scared to pick up your phone, you were petrified of the comments, maybe you were somebody that was self-harming? Like, what was the pinnacle moment where you were at your lowest, where you really felt like shit about yourself? Pinnacle moment. And that, rather than going through, you know, like, I felt like this, and then this happened, and then and then that happened, and my partner broke up with me, and then I lost my job, and then da 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 da. Even though each one of those things matters, even though each one of those things is a life moment for you or for everyone who has experienced these different challenges, when we go on and on and on, and does everybody agree with me? When you go on and on and on in a story, you lose people. We get distracted. Our minds, especially if you're like me, just start thinking about something else. So go into the pinnacle moment, that moment where you felt the most shit about yourself. Paint that picture for people. Give them the detail. Make them feel like they're sitting there with you. And then remember what Kevin said, engagement. Remember what I said, specific example, general emotion. So when you're in that pinnacle moment of your lowest time, sharing your example and your story of that, pause, turn to the audience and say, I felt lost, alone, and like complete shit. Has anybody else ever felt that way before? Thank you so much for your honesty. And so after that, and then we transition back out. But there's your pinnacle moment. There's your specific story, but with general connection. People can relate to the emotions, but they might not have been through your specific pinnacle moment of that example. Does that help, Bella? I don't think you've got your camera on, but just let us know in the chat if that was helpful. And I just wanted to add that on,
Very nice.
using what Kevin guided us through on Bella's example.
I love that. And it highlights a good point. The pinnacle moment doesn't have to mean the highest moment or the best moment or the most insightful. The pinnacle can easily be the downest down. You were just about to step up and speak in front of 150 of your fellow fire dancers, and you were just petrified, but knew you were going to do it anyway. So the pinnacle moment doesn't have to be a high. A good thing, as it were, so to speak. Now we're going to dive in to give you additional techniques and tips for story building. If you can only walk away with 3 things, define the beginning, middle, and end. I know you're adults. I know that seems simple, but write it down and know exactly the beginning and middle end. That way you know where you are in the story, you know where you're headed, and you won't drift. A good story is just long enough. 2, tonality. Range in tonality is one of the single most effective ways to retain attention. I'll say it again. Range in tonality is one of the single most effective ways to retain attention. And if we don't have much variation in our tonality, even the most interested people will fade away eventually. That's not opinion either. That's fact. That is science, well-studied science. Range in tonality, ups, downs, lows. What's your strength? That's something I meant to mention earlier. What is your tonality strength? Some of us are very confident right here in the middle, and this is where we like to stay. Some of us, when I'm nervous, I tend to stay up here too much, and I stay too much in my comfort zone, which is way up high. I need to drop to the middles and the lows so that the highs are more impactful. Where's your strength? Is it down here? Is it in the middle? Is it up high? Know your strength. Recognize that you probably lean on and spend too much time in that zone. Know your strength. Circling back though, tonality, variation. Get better at tonality. use the tools and techniques to practice tonality differences, and practice with friends and family. Finally, create engagement. Ask questions. Has that ever happened to you? Where in your story, if and as you write it down, is your engagement? Have you ever burned your eye? Have you ever heard someone tell you something and you thought, absolutely not? Have you ever had a moment just blow your mind? What is that like? By asking questions, we get people to engage, create engagement. There's other ways to create engagement. If you're talking to a big group, raise your hand if that's happened to you. Raise your hand if that's happened to you. Everybody shake your head, feel the warmth, feel the energy. That's what the heat was like. There's so many ways physically to, put one finger up. How many times? Let me see the fingers. How many times has this happened to you? There's so many ways to create engagement, especially speakers in the room, teachers, trainers. You should have engagement points planned out in your stories. And then identifying the pinnacle moment. Now let's go on to some bonus tips, essentially bonus suggestions. By that, I mean, we want you to get those core 3 things. That alone, if you invest time and energy into it, will make you a more effective storyteller, period. But there's more to it. Here's one. You want a short, medium, and long version of each story, especially public speakers in the room. Sometimes you have an hour on stage, and sometimes you have 5 minutes. If you're a flow arts teacher or prop instructor, it's useful to have short versions of stories, long versions of stories, and everything in between. So the same story can be told in the 2-minute version, the 5-minute version, and the 10-minute version. The 2-minute version of my deep coal bed story is, as I've already said, there I was outside by the fire with my longtime firewalker friend, Steve. And we had a big coal bed left over from a fun night. And there it was, super deep. And he jokingly says, looks about right. Let's walk through it. And I said, no way. I said, haha, yeah, right. But you know what? He persisted. He convinced me that he could do it. And I watched him stomp through coal bed that deep, hot red coals, barefoot. Couldn't believe it. And after he did it, he hyped me up and I did it too. And that moment really did change my life, because now I find myself being skeptical about things and I don't shut them down as quick. Someone says, yeah, this thing is a thing. You could do that. I don't immediately say impossible. I pause and think, can I do this? That's a 2-minute version. I could tell that story in 5 minutes, flesh out each moment, really go into the conversation between Steve and I, really make the moment where he actually does it. He takes off his shoes. He hypes himself up screaming like I've never seen. And then 1 foot and then another. I could extend it. 2, 5, and 10-minute versions of a story. If you got a good story, a good moment, the first time you did public speaking, the first time you firewalked, the story about glass walking in the garage, any of these stories that you've listed, can have a 2-minute, a 5-minute, and a 10-minute version. And if you are a professional trainer or want to be a public speaker, this is massive. Seriously, you're in there in the moment, looking at how much time you have left. I have 10 minutes left. I can pull out the story of the movie theater line and tell the 2-minute version and get that. You want to have the short, the medium, and the long. This is after when you're first crafting your story, don't worry about how long it is. But eventually, how much time do you have? How hard do you want to hit the point? You wouldn't maybe tell the 10-minute chili story. Now, Harriet's extremely good at public speaking, and she probably nailed the 10-minute chili story like a pro. But relatively speaking, those 10-minute stories should have the deepest teaching, the big lesson behind it all. Harriet, another bonus tip for the group.
Sure. Can think of a couple, and we'll just keep going as much value as we can. If anyone's got any questions, please pop them in the comments box. If you've got questions that we can answer, that'll be specific tips, bonus information. So please pop any questions in the chat. I think my next biggest one would be, everybody take a deep breath in and out. And just look at the camera. Doesn't matter about your notes. Doesn't matter about what your cat or your kids or whatever is going on in the room around you. Just take a moment to look at the camera, hear my words, hear my voice. And now everybody just touch their chin. Just take a moment. And all of you. Well, you guys are good. You guys are good and you're on it. You all went to your chin. So it feels like for a moment there, fail. However, let me share with you that when I do this, especially in person, especially in public, when I do that same activity, a lot of people put their hands straight to their cheek. Why? Because people are more visual. Yes? So my tip for sharing your stories is physiology, gestures, and little actions with your body that reflect the story you are telling. Everybody has different learning styles. We're not here to go into that, but everybody is visual. And when we see something, we interpret a message from it. So visually connect your stories. If you're on the phone to someone, get on the phone. Be on the phone to that person. If you're having a conversation, be person number A. So I was talking to so-and-so and they were saying da 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 da. And they replied to me and said, now I'm person number 2. Yes? Do you feel that? Instead of me just telling you about a conversation that I had on the phone with 2 people, now you're with me. Now you feel me. I'm on the phone, I'm talking to somebody. Oh, and guess what? Here's the second person speaking. Or small. It was tiny. Like it was such a tiny chili, and yet it burned my eye, right? Whatever it might be, but what's the visual that you can give? Use your physiology. And I don't just mean like actions and gestures that reflect the words. I mean your general being. As Kevin said, with tonality, like you might be someone that's similar to Kevin and myself. I don't like saying high energy anymore, because how many of you have been around people that are like silent, super calm, super still, but you feel their presence? Like they've got high energy. So I don't like to use that word. What I use more often is expressive. Kevin and I are immensely expressive. Like how I tell stories on stage is how I tell stories to my husband in my kitchen. Yes, I might amplify it for bigger stages, but essentially I'm a very expressive person. So like Kevin said with the tonality, maybe you're not someone that speaks with quite a loud day-to-day voice. So here is your power and here is your gentle. Maybe you're someone that has a much softer voice. So this is your lower tone. And this is your power tone, which actually is loud for you. Yes. And it's the same with your gestures. You might not be Harriet, like, it was massive, but you might say it was big. It was really big. And in the same, Kevin was talking about emotional quality through your voice, emotional quality through your physiology, right? If I do this, I'm so scared my chair's going to fall. I'm leaning back on the back legs. You remember that thing you were told never to do at school? I'm leaning back on my chair. If I sit like this and just kind of chill, have a sip of my tea and say, I am so excited. I feel pumped. I feel really excited. Do you believe me? Does that feel congruent? But if I say, I am pumped, I am super excited for what's happening today. Yes, it's going to be awesome. Now, do you believe me more? Same comment, same statement. I'm excited. I'm pumped to do this, but different tonality and different physiology. You feel me? Yeah. How many of you know that moment where you're on the sofa, you don't feel great, you're eating a bag of Doritos or whatever crisps you enjoy, you've got a film or a TV series on Netflix, you're binge watching something, you don't feel great, and suddenly you think, oh, I should go and sort my room. I should go for a run. I should do the washing up. Something comes in your mind. And how do you feel? Your whole body's like, oh, I don't want to do this. Can you relate to that? Why? Because physiology impacts the way we feel. Your physiology impacts how you feel, and demonstrating your physiology through your storytelling lets how the emotion of the story and the congruency of the message land with your audience. Does that make sense, everybody?
Absolutely. And I totally agree.
So
Physiology.
and gestures.
Physiology is so important. Gestures are a skill. And I know there's several of you in the crowd who are prop manipulators. And good news, that's a physical skill. And so too is gesturing. And you can learn it just like you can learn a prop skill. I've learned so many great techniques for gesture improvement. And we're going to next year, it's like a whole year away, we're going to do a live 3-day event called Speaker Fire. I want to mention it a few times before the end of the event, but we will be going in depth. But some quick suggestions. This is a tip from Brian Moore from Ireland. Great speaker trainer, great firewalk instructor. He made us tell stories with overt gestures, meaning we had to be gesturing. They had to be goofy or over the top. Like, I was walking to the store and there I was standing right next to this person who had terrible breath. I mean, it was pure poison that was coming out and I was very uncomfortable. Now, what I'm doing is over the top, overt gesturing, because as we expand our self and our sense of gesturing, we get more comfortable and better at it. Just like range in tonality is scientifically proven to increase attention and engagement, so too is gesturing. They've done studies, and the person who just stands there with no gesturing doesn't have as effective as engagement by a dramatic degree as someone who is naturally in gesturing. Not always up here, not always down here, but everything in between. So this activity of overt gesturing, there I was, standing right next to Steve after this great firewalk. We've walked hundreds of people. It was a massive crowd. And we were left with this big coal bed. I mean, deep. It was deep. By stretching yourself, not in front of people, but alone or to the camera or with a friend, and trying these overt gestures, you expand. You know, a rubber band once expanded never returns exactly to its original dimension. It's slightly expanded. So overt gesturing. Gesturing with friends and family a little more. Seriously, talking to people, get those arms moving. Don't keep them stuck down here. Don't keep them up and always here. But natural flowing gestures is a physical skill. And if you are better at gesturing, you are a more effective speaker. That is the way of things. And so it's a physical skill, meaning at first it has to be very conscious. And it feels like lifting weights just to get those hands out of this little spot here. But eventually it becomes natural. You know, my speaker coach, Krish, told me, he's like, Kevin, you're juggling. This is how I gestured. Everything I always said, this is how I gestured. He's like, stop, do that. And he asked me, what are you doing? And I said, gesturing. And he asked the audience, he said, what is he doing? And they all said, juggling. And I'm like, oh, you're right. I was just juggling because that's my comfort zone. So lines, dots, you know, gestures are big. Find ways to practice gesturing in your day-to-day life and try to be overt and push beyond the comfort zone. You will feel uncomfortable as you gesture out more, and that's a good thing. Everyone on this call, myself and Harriet included, can improve our gesturing. So absolutely, gestures are a big deal. And it's not just hands. Classic gesturing is thought of in the hands and the arms, but gesturing with the eyes, with the face, body language is gesturing. Well, I was scared and everything, and I was freaking out, but finally when I did it, oh, I felt so good. It's not just hands. Gesturing is a physical body thing. All right, some more tips and suggestions to help you evolve as a storyteller as we go. Look for stories in your day-to-day. Write them down. Just a little note on your phone or something, you know, start the tab right now, open your phone, go to notes and start a thing that says my stories. My stories. And then as you go through, like I said, just last night and this morning, we're dealing with a water heater dripping and leaking down onto the floor. It's this whole huge deal. And if I look at that as like, oh, this is an opportunity for a story. Not only does it reframe my mindset about a shitty situation, pardon my language, but it will also help me keep looking for the lessons as it's happening. Are you facing a thing? Did you just recently give your first major public speech? Small stories, big stories, you need them all, and not just your stories. What are the top 3 stories that you like to tell and share? I love the tigers and strawberries story. I won't go in depth and tell the whole thing, but most people have heard it or a version of it once or twice. And even though it's been told throughout the ages, it's a great story and something that I like to lean on. Michon, I have to go, but this has been awesome, especially the pieces on tonality. Thank you so much. I know you actively present and teach. So if you can improve in even one little way, I'm sure your participants will benefit. Thank you for joining us, Michon. Look for stories in your day-to-day life. Write them down. They don't have to be profound. It's harder to go back and think, what is my stories, than it is to experience something, like, oh, I just learned this new skating trick, just hit this ramp in a different way. Like, wow, that's a great story. I often find if I look back on my Facebook feed, I'm serious, I see my stories. Oh, I did that. Oh, yeah. It's so hard to remember a month, let alone a year or a decade ago. But in today's modern world, whether through any number of social media sites, our stories are already there. I guarantee if you scroll through your social media, and it doesn't have to be a joyful story of overcoming and winning. Sometimes the story is about just having the strength to get up and try again the next day. Sometimes the story has no big victory. Sometimes it's about connecting in sorrow or strife. It doesn't have to be triumphant, is what I'm getting at. The tip here is look for your stories, both in your past and in your just day-to-day life. You're at the store, this person makes you mad, but you got over it somehow. Story. Another bonus tip and suggestion for them, Harriet.
Sure. I just want to say, is everyone taking value from this? Because I just took notes on Kevin's tip. Like, I learned a lot from Kevin, especially in the fire world, but speaking too. And I thought that was brilliant. Looking through your Facebook newsfeed. Yes, Ted. Loads of notes. Looking through your Facebook newsfeed. What a beautiful way to start building your speaker library. And I highly recommend that. I do the same. I have a notes tab in my phone. I also have a little journal. If anyone keeps a diary or a journal, I don't know if you're like myself, anyone diary or journal out there? That's another wonderful resource to go back, look through, and gain stories and examples, etc., etc. My next tip. The power of the pause.
Ooh.
I wanted to see if I could go there and just see if Kevin was like, is she still on? Did her connection quit?
The power of the pause.
That's another bonus tip, by the way. Have fun with what you're doing. But seriously, that's my tip, power of the pause. It actually wasn't going to be. I hadn't planned to say this. But how many of you notice? I'm going to big myself up in this moment. I've talked enough crap about myself in my life. I'm going to big myself up right now and say, I do this very well. Kevin does this very well. Both of us do it a little too well. It's become so natural. We almost missed it as a bonus tip to share. The power of the pause. Take a moment.
Yeah.
Why? It allows your story, the point of your story, the pinnacle moment of your story, the engagement of your story. It allows that moment to land. If Kevin told his coal bed story and was like, and I went through the deepest moment of the coals and it was absolutely insane, but I did it. I didn't believe I could, but I did it. And then after that, we followed and we went back into the event room and then we carried on and we reflected on our day and we moved on to the next activity. The moment's gone. You don't feel Kevin's pinnacle moment. But if I say, and then I saw Steve go through and I worked up the courage and I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. I walked through the coal bed barefoot. And again, it doesn't have to be loud. Like Kevin and I do bring the volume, but be authentic, go in your style. But again, even if you're sharing something softly, a moment in your life that was just so beautiful. And I couldn't believe it. I was sitting outside and this wonderful butterfly, a butterfly, landed on my hand. And it was just so magical. And in that moment, I felt connected. I felt peaceful. I felt like I was in bliss. There's two different examples, one loud, one quiet, but both with the power of the pause. Now, we don't have enough time tonight, and this masterclass is about storytelling, but this is a skill for all of your public speaking. Whenever you make an important moment, a powerful quote, an insane statistic that's like, whoa, and really supports your information, the pinnacle moment of your story, the message from your story, the punchline at the end of your talk. If you're sharing an achievement or something you've been through, pause. Because pausing allows the message to land. It allows your audience to think about your information. And just to take this one step further before I throw it back to Kevin, we've spoken a lot about engagement. And I see this so much because I've trained hundreds of speakers from around the world. I talk to people about engagements and I say, ask a question. Because like we said earlier, if you ask a question, the mind answers. Even if your audience isn't actually verbally speaking back to you, what happens? When I've asked you questions tonight, have you answered in your mind? Now all of you are thinking, yes, because we do. Our brains are wired to work that way. We respond to questions. So tonight, Kevin and I have said about engagement, ask questions, interact with your audience, but please combine the two. Because again, if I say to you, let's use the example we did earlier tonight, the chili story. How many of you have ever been burned? How many of you have been in a situation in your life where you did something and it hurt you, but you kept going back to it and doing it over and over again? Guess what? Earlier on this afternoon, I did that with chili. You've missed my questions. They've gone. I didn't give you time to answer it. But if I use engagement and the power of the pause, how many of you ever been burned? Pause. Let them interact. Let them engage. How many of you have done something in your life and it didn't feel good, but you had to do it a couple of times before you took the lesson? How many of you have ever done something like that before? Pause. Let them answer and then keep going. That is my final tip and support for really supporting to make your story, the pinnacle moments, the punchline and the message land. Say it and let it hang with your audience.
Truly, the power of the pause. I'm so glad you said that. It is so important. Something I'm working on to this day. My tendency is to go on to the next sentence. When we are speaking and presenting, our minds are going a mile a minute. And so we immediately want to jump on to the next thing and say the next thing because we want to keep going. And it's easier to talk. Pause and letting a pause settle takes a little more confidence and comfort, but talk about improved processing. It's like silt in the creek. You stand in there, muck it all up, and it's unclear. When you make your point, when you hit the pinnacle, when you have an emotional quality, pause. It's also about you. It's not just about them and their processing and how they receive it. It's about you. When you pause and take a moment, you get clear, and then you say the next thing. Especially when we're nervous, most speakers keep right on to the next thing, and then they keep going because they add this, and they have run-on sentences because they're nervous, and they keep going, and over time, the retention just plummets. You need to pause. Your statements need a period, an exclamation point, a question mark. I wanted to address something that was brought up in the chat really quick, and then I'll hand it back to you, Harriet, about getting the shakes through nervousness and holding cards. And one thing is, I wanted to share that when I hold a card too long, I also get some shakes. When I'm holding a thing and I'm reading of it, after 5-10 minutes, that happens to me as well. One, I find that 3x5 note cards with bullet points in the pocket is helpful. And that way I can pull it out, see what my next topic is, and put that down and improv. When we actually hold on to our notes for too long, it's hard for, I think, most people to keep it perfectly still. Another thing is whether it's a whiteboard or a notepad on the ground, you just walk over and take a quick look at what the next thing is. The notes don't have to be in our hand. You can have detailed, meticulous notes about a presentation, and a tiny table is great. A tiny table is great, but it can be on the ground. It can be on a whiteboard. There's an old speaker trick where you actually write your main bullet points on the butcher paper in the back of the room, and that way you just look back. But if you're outside a tiny table, notes in the pocket, I think that holding on to something the entire presentation is genuinely difficult. Doable, but difficult. And then lastly, yeah, I do think that getting some gestures out can help with that energy. There's an energy. You can't just say, go away, be gone, but you can move it out a little bit with some more flowery gestures and that kind of thing. So I thought that was a really good comment. Harriet, you had your hand up.
Yes, I got so into what you were saying then. And funny enough, I made my quote. Look, Kevin and I are in sync. I put whiteboard at the back just as he started sharing that. That's another good way. If you don't feel like you like holding something, for me, it's not even about the shakes. I just don't like holding something. I forget about it. I'll put it down. I'll walk off and then I'll go, oh, where are my notes? I'm lost. Yeah. So there's different ways of doing it. You don't have to. Some people don't enjoy this, but just another idea. You can make a couple of notes on the back of your hand. Like I use a very concise, very simple template structure, and I teach this to any student that works with me. How do you remember a long talk with a simple, concise structure? So again, you can put that on your back of the hand. Like Kevin said, you could put it at the back of the room. But here's a great one. How many of you speak online? You share and you present on camera as well. A few of you nodding there. Post-it notes. I think I need to become a rep, or I need to be sponsored by Post-it notes. I use them for everything. They are around my house, my car, everywhere. But for teachers, for storytellers, especially if you're someone that gets nervous right now, Post-it notes. Put Post-it notes next to your camera. Breathe, stay calm, smile. Put another Post-it note that says engage. Put another story that says stick to the point of your story, right? Whatever you need to, put Post-it notes around your camera that give you the message you need to help you show up in a better way for your audience.
Love that. Love that. And even in person, a Post-it note here or there or on the side of the thing, whatever the case is, I think that you're certainly not the only one who gets the shakes holding things for any extended period of time. All right, one more quick tip, and then we're going to wrap this thing up because we are a punctual people, if nothing else. The repetition of your core point. Repeat your main point. What do you want them to walk away with? So many times we listen to somebody and it's someone later asks us, what was that about? What did they say? I don't know. You want your audience to be able to say, oh, this was their message. Oh, it was about this. How clear are you? You often need to repeat yourself more than you think you should. You know your point. And I find that if you only say it once, they doesn't land. Like in firewalking, right? I used to only say once. You could get burned if you try this. I would only say it once. And then people very frequently, I didn't know I could get burned. I thought it was a trick. I thought, it's like, well, I said no. Nowadays, if you go to one of my firewalks, I use it. I lean into it. I say, anyone who crosses this coal could get burned. I say it a bunch of times. And it speaks to the point of repeat, repeat, repeat. With my deep coal bed, I might start with, don't argue for your limitations. I want to share a story about a time when I was so convinced I couldn't do something, and I could. I was arguing for my own limitations. My friend said that this was possible. I'm abbreviating the story. He said we could walk through this deep coal bed, and I was like, yeah, right. Even though I would literally have done crazy things on hot coal beds, I still instantly and immediately shut him down and said, that's not possible. Yeah, right. I couldn't do that. You couldn't do that. It's not possible. But I was wrong. I was wrong. I argued for my own limitations, and I was clearly and dead wrong because later that night, I myself walked barefoot through a red coal bed that deep. Don't argue for your limitations. That was just a quick 1-minute version of a story where I repeated the main lesson 3 or 4 times. You should repeat your main point. Repeat your main point. So much more in the world of public speaking and storytelling to practice your stories. Oh, I also have another comment in the chat here. I would also do some exercise before you go on stage to support feeling better in a more confident state when you start. Yes, well said. If you're feeling anxious before you head out, what your state in when you go out to present, it matters. And there are things you can do before you head out to modulate, to adjust your own state. Some speakers like Tony Robbins, they're backstage and they're, yeah. They're pumping themselves up. Other speakers like Peggy Dillon, they get in a more spiritual space and they breathe. And there are so many ways. Say a mantra. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm calm, composed, and confident. Let's go. I say that to myself to this day. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm calm, composed, and confident. Let's go. So a mantra, breathing, an exercise, a visualization, we're all different. Whatever the case is, I'm glad you brought it up because adjusting your state before you head out absolutely matters. Change your internal story. Don't fight the shakes. Lean into feeling more comfortable, and in time, it will shift. I love it. Well said. Well said. This is a journey. Becoming a effective storyteller, a good public speaker is this long-standing journey that we stand on. We don't hop into the square, take one class, and then boom, we're effective. The amount of classes, workshops, and mentors that Harriet and I have around this are extensive. And we're both at a point where people describe us as good public speakers, but that doesn't mean we stop. Okay, I'm good now. We still study. I still just 2 weeks ago finished a great audiobook called Captivate. I highly recommend it. Captivate. Great audiobook on public speaking. Even though I've spent thousands of dollars and tons of time learning to do it, I'm still learning. And so too do I encourage you. There are so many quick little videos, right? Water your speaker garden every day. Watch a 5-minute public speaking video. Get an audiobook. Stay on the journey. And on that note, in a couple months, we're going to do another free virtual event. I hope you'll join us. And if you're curious how you might know about it, I'm going to link a group in the thing. A lot of you were on our event page on Facebook. This is our Speaker Fire group. Speaker Fire group. We are using the metaphor of flame to shine on stage, to shine a light on what your message is, to glow, to have warmth and confidence and energy. And sometimes it's a small little ember, and sometimes it's a roaring fire, but we use flame and fire as a guiding metaphor and symbol for what we're doing here. So in addition to future free trainings, reposts of other content around speaking, 1 year and 1 month from now, we're doing a 3-day live in-person Speaker Fire event. There will be special guests. There will be a ton of fun. The signups aren't even open yet, but I want to bring it to your attention. And that is, get my dates out here, August 22nd through 24th. We are planning this a year in advance, and I believe that is a sign that we really care and will be making this a world-class speaker training that speaks to people who connect with fire and flame. And so I encourage you, mark it down. It'll be in California, August 22nd through 24th. Speaker Fire, please join our Facebook group, stay connected with us, and I'll leave the final comments to you, Harriet.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Can we send in some love? Isn't he awesome? Yes, we appreciate you. I've been learning. That was another great tip. Captivate. I'm going to go and get it. Yes, I am also super excited about Speaker Fire. It is going to be an incredible event. I was super blessed to be out with Kevin running the first one, our first ever Speaker Fire last year. So it's going to be incredible to come back The students gained so much value from it. They walked in nervous, anxious, and not really sure how to convey a message. They walked out as confident speakers, still training, still honing the skill, but knowing and understanding exactly how to not just speak, but impact. How many of you have taken value from today? It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you. I really encourage joining the group. I really encourage coming to the event. You'll get even more, so much more than you got today. But even if you don't join us at that event, come and join us in the Facebook group. You're obviously serious about improving your storytelling, your public speaking. So come and join us. They're not quite daily, but there are regular tips, resources, and information, inspiration within that group to continue supporting your journey. But otherwise, thank you so much to everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Send yourself some love for investing your time and your energy. Get out there and use it. Share your stories, practice your stories, connect with Kevin and I if you want to know any more or have any more questions. But otherwise, fire up your voice and share those stories.
Perfectly said. We will send a recording out if anyone wants to rewatch this for those who signed up. Practice with friends, practice with your family, and share your story. Fire up your voice. We love you. We appreciate you taking a valuable time out of your life to join us, and we will see you all by the fire. Take care.